Greetings! Welcome to the fifth video of our discussion of Martin Heidegger's Being and Time. As I said in a note to the last video, I wasn't really entirely happy with how I presented things there. I also wasn't very happy about how long the video was. I'm trying to keep these relatively short. But be that as it may, philosophy is process as well as result. And what I'd like to do now is just continue with some of the themes that I didn't get to last time, in particular having to do with the phenomenological method of investigation. And then go on and talk about the ontology of Dasein and how it is that Dasein, the being of Dasein, is different, fundamentally different, from the being of entities that Heidegger calls present at hand entities, such as, the kinds of entities that are described in purely physical terms, in terms of mass, size, location, all of that. Okay. So I said phenomenology is essentially a first-person endeavor. Indeed, Dasein is defined as being first person. In the very beginning of the text, past the introduction, Heidegger gives an ostensive definition, if you will, of what Dasein is. Dasein is the being which is in each case mine. And he elaborates upon that and says that Dasein is a being that can only be addressed with personal pronouns. I, you, we, they. But in just saying that, phenomenology is an attempt to describe the character of, again using non-Heideggerian terms, conscious experience, we miss out on something. What we miss out on is how difficult phenomenology is. And it's kind of a paradox. What could be more obvious than the character of my concretely lived conscious life? What I see, hear, smell, taste, my emotions, my thoughts. What could be clearer? And yet, it turns out that if Heidegger is correct, each of us is naturally inclined to understand ourselves, understand Dasein, in a way that is misleading. More than misleading, it's just wrong. And that is because when we try to understand ourselves, we have a model of what it is for something to be. And that model is the model of the present at hand. The model of the rock, the molecule, the star, the moon, piece of wood. A model of, we might say, of a thing. A thing which is characterized in terms of its properties, in terms of its categorical properties. And by categorical properties, I mean fundamental ways that we can describe things. The more fundamental ones. And so examples would be substance. What is it to be a substance? Well, traditionally, to be a substance is to be a thing that can exist independently. And then there is the category of quality or property, like red. Red cannot exist on its own. It needs to be the redness of a thing. So if you take an apple, a nice present at hand object, the apple is a substance. It has independent existence, but the redness of the apple does not have that, nor does the mass of the apple. Now, Heidegger does not, as far as I know, anywhere in Being and Time or anywhere else in his early work, deny that there is a role to play for these traditional categories. That they're part of philosophy. That they may provide us with some kind of significant insight. But what he does insist is they don't apply to me. They don't apply to you. They don't apply to Dasein. And when you try to apply these categories that are correctly applicable to the present at hand, the apple, and use the categories and use them, like substance, for instance, to characterize ourselves, we just fall into confusion and we fall into an error. So Heidegger insists, and this becomes clear. I really, really want to get more into the actual body of the text, where it becomes very clear that we have a natural way of interpreting ourselves in terms of the present at hand, and that is a mistake, and that, in fact, phenomenological reflection, reflecting on the character of our lives as concretely lived, can reveal to us what this mistake is. But it's not obvious. That's why it's kind of a paradox. Like, well, if it's just there as part of what I am, why can't I just see it? I can't because of the interpretive character of Dasein's understanding of itself. That is something that must be lifted. That is something that must be uncovered, as he says. And so, when it comes to Dasein, Heidegger tells us that instead of using the categories as ways of understanding ourselves, he instead introduces this term existentialia. Probably mispronounced that. But, and basically, this category of existentialia, existentialia is to Dasein what categories are to the apple, blade of grass, bundle of mercury atoms. And to understand the character of Dasein, the being of Dasein, we need to understand what these existentialia are. And so he goes on and he says, I am not even going to use the word existence to apply to rocks, stars, and planets, to the present at hand. I'm going to limit existence to Dasein. And this is something Kierkegaard also does, by the way, where he talks about it, when Kierkegaard talks about existence, it's always the existence of a human being. not the existence of an inert object, bracketing non-human conscious beings for the moment. Well, throughout our discussion of the book, I think Heidegger had a rather naive behaviorist understanding of non-human animals. But, as I said before, screw him. You don't have to deal with that. So what is an example of an ontological, fundamental ontological feature of Dasein and existentiality? This is it. And here it is. And much of the first part of Being in Time is just an explication of what is involved in this characterization of Dasein as being in the world. And when you hear being in the world, and you realize that it's meant as a characterization of Dasein's relation to the world, you need to be clear that we're not talking about the categorical relation of location, right? The bench is in the lecture room, Heidegger's example. The pen is in the cup. Man, I don't have any visual aids. Coins are in this old sugar container thing. Note that the category of location, being in, which is what being inside something is, it's giving the location of the object. In that case, the object and the container that has it are externally related. So, allow me to prove this experimentally. Here, container. Here, quarter. Look again. Quarter is in the container. I remove the quarter. Has the quarter changed its nature? Has the quarter become anything fundamentally different because it's no longer in the container? Has the container changed its character or essence because the quarter is no longer in it? There is a tradition in philosophy, a tradition found in British absolute idealism, according to which something like that is true. But I hope you can see that intuitively and naturally, the relationship of location, of being inside something, the category of location, involves nothing essential about the nature of the container or anything essential about the object or objects that are located in the container. I am Dasein. You are Dasein. Each of us is in the world, but we are not in the world like the quarter is in the cup. That is Heidegger's first and most fundamental insight. But if we're not in the world the way the quarter is in the cup, or in the way Mercury is in the solar system, what else? What else are we doing? What is the existentialia that parallels the category of location? And again, this is what Heidegger we'll be discussing, and we will be discussing probably 25 more of these videos in one respect or another. But most generally, to just get a handle on the idea, is to compare the quarter in the silver container and the way we use in contexts such as I was in a conversation with someone. If I'm in a conversation with you, my being in that conversation involves essential relatedness between you and me. And each of us change in virtue of that conversation. Assuming it's a real conversation and it's not somebody just ignoring you, right? Or we might say, might use the word engaged, right? So I am engaged in a conversation with somebody. And when you're engaged in a conversation with somebody, that's not an external relation. Or think of personal relationships. You're in love with somebody, assuming they love you back. The love is not a neutral being in type thing. It involves, it influences. It is internal to the two people that are related by a love. And Heidegger thinks, and man, I'm already at 17 minutes. I'm gonna have to stop. Heidegger thinks that philosophers and scientists and ordinary people have just got it totally wrong when they attempt to understand Dasein, our fundamental character, as related to the world in the way the sun is related to the solar system, or in the way the penny is related to the cup.